If there's something that Sony PlayStation keeps doing, it's making cinematic third-person games that are either shooters or some form of an action RPG. But another thing they keep doing is taking legacy franchises that feature men and then replacing them with female characters, as I'll explain throughout the entire video. I'll tell you what I believe is the good way of doing this, and how things can also go very, very wrong later on in this video too. Because this is a minefield territory no matter how you look at it, but usually I would be against this. I mean, it's happened a lot already. Last of Us, Ghost of whatever, Ratchet and Clank, Uncharted, Infamous did it as well, and now apparently God of War is the next in line to make this happen as well. In case you don't know, there were some big leaks proven to be true by various credible leakers and websites that caused the God of War fandom especially to get really, really angry, because the only character anyone wants to play as in God of War is Kratos for very obvious reasons. But now it's been confirmed that the next God of War game is a spin-off title that won't be called God of War. No one has revealed the title of the game yet anyways, but the other huge revelation is that Faye, that's Kratos' late wife in God of War 2018 in Ragnarok, will be the main character of the spin-off title instead. So Nate the Hate, that's a credible leaker of games, confirmed as seen here that the next God of War game will star Faye. It will be more action-oriented over RPG stuff like the recent two games were obviously, and it will be revealed this summer in 2026 of course. And the release date will be next year in the first half of 2027. This also falls in line with what Christopher Judge, who in case you forgot as seen here is the voice and motion capture actor for Kratos, confirming to a fan recently at a con. I can't exactly show the clip because it will likely get taken down, but basically a fan secretly filmed Christopher Judge and then asked him about the future of God of War, and Judge said that he's working on multiple games and that we would see what's happening next this summer, which again, that falls in line with the reveal of this Faye game that's happening. So naturally, a lot of people are really angry about this because this is now a God of War game not starring Kratos, but also a woman. And usually I would be against this since Sony does keep doing this sort of thing. However, in this instance, I also want to make the argument that this actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it logically. You see, the reason why I didn't like that Ghost of Tsushima went into Yote was because it betrayed the story of Jin Sakai at its core. There was so much story to tell with Jin and discover how he defeated the Mongol invasion and actually saved Japan in a potential sequel game. Instead, Jin's victory and his life was summed up in a single animated cutscene by Sucker Punch in Yote's story. To put this in God of War terms, imagine if God of War 2018 happened as it did, but then Ragnarok was relegated to a single cutscene and all of its events in a game starring someone else other than Kratos. That, in my opinion, that was a cardinal sin in Sucker Punch's actions. Because you not only removed a far more interesting story to just tell another Revenge is Bad tale again for the millionth time, but you replaced a very compelling protagonist with a female one instead for like, again, the 5th or 6th time or something. However, circling back to God of War and Faye, this is a little bit different. So in case you forgot, Faye is kind of the reason why the Norse games happened in the first place. Obviously, she's the wife of Kratos, their son is Atreus, who is basically Loki in all but name from being able to take the form of animals and have connections to the higher realms. Another plotline that was teased in Ragnarok but not fully explored was that there is a realm above the mortal one that is akin to like a heaven, but it is actually controlled by beings that are even more powerful than the gods that reside on Earth. And the idea there was that when gods die, like the Greek ones or the Norse ones I guess, they enter some sort of higher heaven that's only really meant for gods. It ties into that mask that Odin is obsessed with in Ragnarok's story, how the mask allows one to see into that realm specifically to some degree. The idea that there are gods among gods, that's an interesting idea to explore. It could mean that beings, for example, like the Archangel Michael of Christian faith, could then exist within God of War's like entire story, but he's so almighty that not even Kratos would be able to stand a chance against him, for example, for obvious reasons. But this all ties into Faye being the main character of a spin-off title, cause it does make sense when you think about it, like I said. So from what we understand, Faye is the one who discovers Kratos when he arrives from Greece following the events of God of War 3. Faye tends to Kratos' wounds and brings him back to life from near death after his journey, obviously. They fall in love and they have Atreus eventually too. Faye is also, in case you don't know, a frost giant, which is not necessarily a god, but a being that is still of immense power anyways. And Faye's age, it puts her somewhere in like the 300 plus years or so bracket, meaning obviously that she can live far longer than a normal human can. Faye, whose full name name by the way is Faye, was a great giant that also opposed Odin and the Aesir before the events of the first game. It's already been confirmed that Faye is a great warrior in her own right, and at one point she even fought Thor himself before the events of God of War 2018, and was able to bring the battle to a standstill with neither coming out of that fight as a real victor. We know this is the case because Kratos finds a spirit that he can talk to that tells him of this legendary battle because this spirit bore witness to it. Here's the clip in game. Please watch this.
You can be with your son now.
Thank you. I can't wait to see his face again.
Now you can help us. What did you see that day?
A battle. Unlike anything I've ever seen. I remember a great clash of metal in the sunlight. Thor, he wielded his hammer, but it was matched by a remarkable axe.
This axe? Did it belong to a fair-haired warrior?
Yes, that's the one. She brandished that axe with exacting precision, strength. Never has there been a weapon to match Mjolnir. But with that axe and that warrior, Thor was able for the fight of his life.
It was Faye who fought Thor in this valley.
It was more than just a fight. It sounds like Mom was beating Thor.
It seems there is much I never knew about her. And now she is gone.
Maybe. But her story here isn't finished.
The story of Faye and Kratos meeting bears less weight when you already know everything, or when you don't know anything that's coming ahead, right? Meeting her needs to actually feel like something that you already know the story that we told here. So there's a greater weight behind who she is. She's got a mythology that's built up. So that first meeting and the period of time that they spend together, so much of it is not about fighting or action. That's the other tough part, is the work that he has to do is harder to do in a situation where you have to go into combat all the time around there, because they're both warriors who have reached a point in their life where they don't want to fight anymore because they both see through the reasons of why they've been fighting. And meeting at that time, at that exact moment, when both of them are willing to set their weapons down, right? It changes fundamentally both of them. And I think, because a lot of people say, oh, who do you identify with, what character in all of the games? And Faye was the one I identified with the most, because I was not there a lot for my kid while he's growing up. I tried to be, but there's a lot of work going on. So I was kind of like Faye. And my wife is kind of like Kratos, going with our son, Atreus, on their journeys, right? And I'm just there occasionally being able to be part of that. And for me, I thought that was just as important, because it wasn't like I was not present at all or not wanting to be present, but things happen, right? And I think for her, I wanted to have a character that felt like there's a really strong reason for why they're doing it, but you get to know her throughout all of this. And you also get to understand that she has way more power than all of them. She is actually the controller of so much within this universe. So that way we build this up to when you actually do get to see this. And I don't know how we're going to tell this or when we're going to tell this, but I really want to tell that story of Kratos and Faye meeting.
So, we know that Faye fought Thor in the past, obviously neither won, but she brought it to a standstill wielding the Leviathan axe. The very same weapon that Kratos uses in the Norse games, as we all know. And the Leviathan axe was forged by the dwarven brothers Sindri and Brock, the same duo that created Mjolnir for Thor as well. It's the same axe that Faye entrusts to Kratos after she dies before the events of God of War 2018, meaning that that weapon was clearly being used long before Kratos was even in the picture to begin with. We also know that Faye, when she first came into contact with Kratos, they actually initially got into a fight, believing each other to be a hostile force, which kind of makes sense. But after that, of course, they stopped fighting and eventually they fell in love with each other. Oh, isn't that cute? But anyways, decades would then pass. And then since then, because they're both gods, or I guess not mortal beings in the human sense, because one's a giant, time doesn't really matter to them that much. And Faye was also the one who obviously taught Atreus how to read Nordic language, how to hunt with the bow that Atreus uses in the games too. And Faye knew Kratos' full story from his time in Greece and accepted him because he told her everything. So what we know is that Faye not only gave Kratos his axe, she gave Atreus his bow to protect him as well. And also, through her ability of foresight, was able to see the coming of Ragnarok as well. We know that the twilight of the gods in that game happened because of actually Faye's actions alone. She, despite dying, was able to bring about the events that would end the Nordic god pantheon ultimately as well. Maybe she knew when she met Kratos that she had found her weapon to end the gods finally, seeing that this guy was literally capable of defeating gods like Hermes, Hercules, and Zeus before. And I mean, if you can kill one lightning god, why not another, right? And remember that the entirety of God of War 2018 was a journey designed by Faye for her husband and son to follow. She even instructs Kratos to cut down trees marked with golden handprints on purpose. It's literally the very first thing you do in the opening of the moments of like God of War 2018 as a video game. This was all done because the trees marked golden, if you don't remember, they were like a protection barrier that Faye created to conceal her location from Odin. And we know that the moment that Kratos cuts down the trees, as instructed by Faye obviously, immediately Odin finds out where they are. And that's why he sends Baldur to meet Kratos, which results in that big fight at their family home. I'm dropping a lot of lore here, I know, but what I'm saying between what happened in those two games and what could happen in the spin-off title, it makes sense. It's pretty obvious why Faye would also hate Odin. I mean, it's pretty much confirmed that Odin wanted to wipe out the giants. We also know that Faye, with her power of foresight, knew that Kratos was coming to her land, and that she voluntarily destroyed the mural that was depicting the fate of Kratos and Atreus in order for the pair to actualize and find their own paths forward. It should also be said that it's pretty much confirmed that Faye is probably, I guess, maybe the strongest frost giant alive when she meets Kratos. I mean, they're all dead, obviously, so it's not much competition, but anyway, she's still able to go toe-to-toe with Kratos in combat as well. And she also fought a drunken Thor when she fights him too. And remember that when Faye and Thor fought, their weapons were actually so powerful that when that fight was over, they literally trapped souls of beings and spirits around their fight in suspended animation due to how powerful their powers were against one another. That's why Kratos talks to that spirit in God of War, for example. That all makes sense now.
This feels familiar. What? Don't matter.
She brandished that axe with exacting precision. Strength. Never has there been a weapon to match Mjolnir. That axe and that warrior, Thor, was saving for the fight of his life.
And also remember that Faye is powerful enough in magic that she was able to conceal her family from Odin, who's also a master of magic himself, for years, obviously, until after her death, and then the events of the game obviously happens. So why am I explaining all of this to you in a video about how God of War fans are actually really mad about Faye being the main character in a spin-off game? Well, it's to convey to you all that actually this idea for a game is a good one if you think about it. Look, other times Sony PlayStation has made a male-centric franchise divert into a female one. It's been mostly a mess, I will admit. Last of Us Part 2 is, I mean, I don't even need to explain that one to you. And Yote, like I said earlier, just did not need to exist over a potential much better, obviously, Tsushima sequel. But whatever, all right? Here the story is told already, right? You have two games with Kratos. And apparently the other rumored leak, what have you, is that the next actual God of War game, as in Mainline I mean, will star Kratos again. Apparently it's set in Egypt, but at this point we don't know 100%, but I mean Egypt makes the most sense. Since Egyptian gods have such ties to death and reincarnation, it would be a very clever way for Kratos to battle both new gods in Egypt, as well as face the ghosts of gods that he fought in the past already. Like you could bring back Hercules or Athena, maybe even Ares via some Egyptian god using their powers to fight Kratos. It could be really cool. So Kratos is obviously the main character of God of War either way, that cannot be denied. But remember that this Faye game will not, I repeat, will not be called God of War at all. Maybe it'll be similar in name. God of Hope maybe. God of Love would be cringe, so probably not that. I think the best name probably would be God of Stories, because that as a name, which is a spin-off, it would be obviously good for a potential future franchise, because you could then use it to tell other stories in the God of War universe, but without obviously Kratos as the main character. This Faye game also makes sense because it ties directly as a connective tissue between God of War 3 and 2018, and as we all know, they're remaking the trilogy as well, so that'll connect as well. And it will likely tell the story of why and how Faye knew everything and why she did what she did to allow Ragnarok to happen in the first place. And let's say this God of Stories franchise takes off, right? I mean, the possibilities are endless here as well. They could make a spin-off title set in Japan, starring a Japanese god, or a Mayan god, or a Slavic one instead. It would be an interesting way to expand the universe of God of War, because like I said, there's that higher realm that exists above everything. And if such powerful gods can exist beyond the gods we have already, what exactly is hiding in that realm? I would love to know that. I mean, imagining Kratos facing Archangel Michael one day, that would be absolutely insane to see. But it would obviously have to be done well, because unlike the Greek or the Nordic pantheons, which are uniquely tied to their locations, other mythologies are global, like Christianity, of course. Now, I'm not saying I would want to see Kratos kill Michael, which is probably technically impossible to do, by the way, because if you don't know, Michael, in terms of the Christian faith, he's basically the ultimate warrior, like the above everything. The only person who sits above Michael in power is God himself, you know, the God. And Michael is so insanely strong that he can even go toe-to-toe with Lucifer and Christian stuff too. And again, the idea that like Lucifer could exist in the God of War universe as a potential enemy threat, that would be absolutely insane to see too. Kratos could even go to the Mayan world, and that would be a brutal like region for Sony Santa Monica to explore, or even like Chinese myth. Kratos versus Sun Wukong, a literal monkey god with his magic pole just absolutely wrecking Kratos and making fun of him. Yeah, that would be cool too. The point is, I understand that people are being skeptical here because previous iterations of let's take a male-led franchise and then make it female, it hasn't exactly worked well in the past, and that's true. It would be a riskier move to say that the next God of War game is replacing Kratos, but as it's being worded and confirmed pretty much, that's not what's happening here. Because even Sony Santa Monica has to know that you can't replace Kratos. Like, he's Super Mario, he's Master Chief, you just can't do that. And again, the dude's a god anyway, so it's not like you're gonna have to worry about the guy aging or anything in the future. Like, if Faye is over 300 years old by the time she kicks the bucket, Kratos only becomes a god proper after beating Ares in the first game, as we know too. And based on how Kratos looks so far, he's maybe like, what, 40 or 50 in terms of how he looks physically? There's no need to really age him up anymore. And even if he does continue to age, I mean, this is a world where giant world-spanning serpents and gods of thunder exist and more. Just Uber Eats Kratos, that fountain of youth, and voila, dude is like a spry young lad again. You couldn't even call that really a cop-out. You're literally playing a Greek guy covered in the ashes of his dead family, wielding fire blades and an ice axe, fighting all kinds of freaks and monsters, so like nothing is really off the table here at all. But like I said, right, normally I would be against this sort of thing, but there's 3 reasons why I'm not potentially here anyways, okay? One is that this was set up since day 1 in the 2018 game, that can't be denied. Number 2, it's a spin-off title and not replacing the mainline series, unlike what Yote did to Tsushima, which I still think is a cardinal sin. And 3, it's being directed by Cory Balrog, who in my opinion is still one of the better directors that PlayStation has in general when it comes to really any of their games these days. Cory Balrog, in case you don't know, he directed God of War 2018, which I thought was a really great game. Cory, however, did not direct Ragnarok, as he was clearly busy working on this Faye game instead, and yeah, I could tell. Because Ragnarok, in my opinion, was not as good as 2018, and for me anyway, story-wise, it didn't hit nearly the same as Kratos' first journey in Midgard. So, if Cory is doing this Faye game, it will likely be very good, and true to what God of War is. Kinda makes me nervous for the mainline title though, if Kratos' journey to Egypt, or wherever he ends up next, isn't Cory Balrog directed, but I'll wait and see on that one. But spin-offs can work in a franchise like this. Again, it just depends on how you do it. Like, for example, right, Insomniac's Spider-Man 2018, in my opinion, that's an amazing game. I was also perfectly fine with Miles Morales getting his own spin-off game or even series starring him, because in my mind it made sense to take Miles and give him his own journey and villains to explore. But the problem with Miles and Spider-Man in Insomniac's games, however, was that they brought Miles back into Spider-Man 2, and then shoehorned Miles into a story he clearly had no business being in the first place. Because in case you never played it, for about half of Spider-Man 2's runtime, while Peter Parker is fighting like Kraven the Hunter and the symbiote and more, Miles is kind of just wasting time helping his student friends with their POC events and helping kids asking their boyfriends to prom. And then like all of a sudden, after Miles has been doing basically nothing interesting the entire time, now he's suddenly the main character and saves the day. Like, no, it's stupid. So what Insomniac did with Miles and Peter is the exact sort of thing you don't do. You don't replace the reason why people are there in the first place, which is why with Faye and Kratos here, it's smartfully being separated into 2 distinct franchises. So Faye, like Miles, can have her spin-off. She just doesn't need to appear in God of War Egypt or whatever else and sideline Kratos. Well, she's dead, so she probably can anyways, but most people don't even want Atreus as well to even take over the franchise either. But if Atreus got his own spin-off series like Faye and Miles, that I would be open to, okay? The point of all of this is you have to respect that these franchises are closely tied to the main characters that embody them. You don't watch James Bond to see what this other agent is doing. You watch James Bond to see Bond doing stuff. Same goes to Super Mario or really anything else. So when you play God of War, you want to be Kratos, duh, obviously, because by definition, he's the God of War, because he killed Ares for the title, we know this. But a God of Story sub-franchise that can take these stories and make it into their own thing, that could be interesting. Again, as long as they don't replace Kratos, it'll be fine, hopefully anyways. I think Sony does realize they can't really replace Kratos anyways, even if they wanted to, because without Kratos, by definition, the game can't even be named God of War anymore. The same way if Atreus were to take over God of War, he's not the God of War. Mischief, yeah, maybe, but not war, so it doesn't work. Now, of course, either way, it needs to be said that the modern narrative design of today is still very flawed, and they need some serious work, because that's just the truth. Most games, even the Sony first-party ones, have kind of shifted from telling these like immersive storytelling things into forcing these calculated nonsense stuff to just kind of lecture their core audiences, which I hate, which is something they cannot afford to do anymore if you ask me. Because we've seen far too many games from like indie all the way to AAA prioritizing these, I guess you can call it ideological friction, if you will, over that of like the satisfaction of the very people who buy these games in the first place, you know, you and me. So at the same time, I can see how some fans of God of War are seeing this and their first instinct is to believe, oh god, they're doing it again, but now with God of War. And these people are not wrong to feel that way, because by definition, they've been witnessing the intentional dismantling of these beloved legacies of stories and characters they love, all in order to like satisfy these annoying internal agendas. Like that is true, that cannot be denied. It's also why so many people are cynical when anything gets announced these days, because if you don't accept the new thing with like open arms, the fans are then just treated by access media and game developer alike to be more like obstacles for them to bypass instead of like considering to be progress or something, which in turn then transforms these once great franchises like your Spider-Mans, your Last of Us's, Ghost of, and more into something that is always met with disdain, because it then feels as though these great franchises are just being turned into like hollow, antagonistic propaganda tools, honestly, instead of being what they should be, which is, I don't know, video games? So I completely understand how someone could take one look at the story and what's going around and go, oh great, another franchise that is going to be designed to hate me again, but it's not necessarily the case this time. There's nuance here that does make sense. Like, don't get me wrong, okay? If a Spider-Man game existed and all you played was Mary Jane, yeah, I would be very pissed. But with Faye here, it is a spin-off title, so that's what it should remain as too. It should never take over the mainline series. But it's very important to remember that no amount of goodwill is going to stop people from having that cynical take. Because whether a game is made in good faith or not, the existence of such storytelling being replaced by just like calculated annoying lectures that are just meant to antagonize you, it's just going to cause people to immediately have their guard up, and you can't really blame them. Like, it needs to be said and understood that much of like the modern narrative design is still about weaponizing and dismantling these games' legacies, because these companies want to chase the modern audience. But that being said, what is going on here is not that. At least I don't think so anyways. We don't have enough info yet to really, make that definitive take yet, but I'm hoping that it's not. So I completely understand the feeling of seeing like your childhood heroes being systematically deconstructed by these creative types, and then when you do call it out, you're just being like gaslighted into not thinking that it's happening when it obviously is right in front of you. I do agree that regardless of who's directing the Faye game or whatever else, what these developers need to prioritize above everything else is player satisfaction, okay? And in the climate that we're in right now, it's becoming more important than ever that these developers, no matter what franchise, that they realize that they have to cater to the loyal fans, because by not doing so, you're betraying the framework of what made these once great franchises in the first place. And if the end game goal is just, we want more friction with the audience, it's never going to work, dude. You need to stop doing this, because it's a terrible idea, and more often than not, it doesn't work anyways. Now I know for a fact from developers I've spoken to that there is a hidden war, if you will, behind the scenes that's happening in games even to today. There are those who want games to just be games, and there are those who want nothing but to remake what worked to fit their current mindsets, and it's never going to not be annoying. So the best way to look at all of this, one side of people making games, they want you to escape into a world that's free of what's happening today, but there is that other side that wants you in a world where they can correct you and talk down to you constantly. And it's very important, no matter what franchise it is, that narrative design is not being weaponized to then insult the very people who show up to keep these games successful in the first place. You know, the players. It's always about them. That's what matters most. Now, that being said, God of War has shown shines of stupidity too. I know, having Kratos struggle against Freya was kind of ridiculous, I'm not gonna lie. Angrboda being race swapped by the inclusion brigade of that consultant group you all know is something that's still stuck out like a sore thumb even to this day. And it still felt very out of place because it made no sense in that world given the demographic around them and where the Nordic games take place, because in case you haven't noticed, the Nordic world is not exactly Africa. What Cory Balrog and his team have to ensure is that they land this game without pissing anyone off. Granted, okay, the God of War 2018 game, as far as we know, had no weirdo consultants working on it, which Cory worked on as well. And again, a game starring Faye, it does at least sound like an interesting journey to take, although I totally understand why nobody would want this game, because they do believe that by giving an inch, they will just take a mile. It's not that people don't want to play games as women. I mean, Resident Evil Requiem just came out and everyone loves Grace Ashcroft and they're already considering her a great protagonist. I think it's just that it's very important to remember that the best way to write female characters is to make sure they're actually written as women and not write them as these like condescending versions of like a man and a woman in the same body who happen to be women, which is oftentimes what these writers tend to do, and it never works. Like the whole narrative design and making it have this like radical antagonistic feel to it, it doesn't work. It never did either, because it then no longer becomes about the player's journey, right? It's, as they say, the message is what matters most to them. But I would like to think that we're hopefully starting to get past it at least a little bit, because the last thing we need right now is Sony Santa Monica getting turned into a propaganda machine. You know, the kinds of studios that believe that the core gaming community is not a group that should be served peak, but instead seen as a problem that these people need to solve. But regardless, the fact that Sony has already cannibalized many of its own like most prestigious franchises by prioritizing corporate activism over what people want has to be called out for what it is. It's why it's very important that they ensure that this game is more than worthy of its spin-off existence, because it's important. Because there's already been way too many examples of things that players love that have been replacing the masculinity with sanitized, often, let's say it how it is, ideological checklists instead. Because to keep doing this is a pivot that just ignores what the core fan base wants, and yes, it could spell disaster for you. And honestly, yes, I'm also kind of sick of Sony believing that they need female-led games in every core franchise pretty much too. And the existence of a Faye game is not going to stop people from throwing their arms up and thinking that nothing is, you know, free of this sort of push anymore. Even if Faye makes sense from a narrative standpoint, the story is great and the gameplay, which is apparently going to be like Bayonetta, ends up being amazing, you will still have people that will ignore this game and refuse to play it because to them, ultimately, God of War is Kratos and that's it to them. And I totally respect that, because many people have their hard line cut off like point for them when it comes to things. That's just how it is. But I would just say we have to wait until we see a real trailer and what's going on here before we all lose our minds. But if there happens to be a scene where Faye is consulting the Giants and the Giants are like a big multicultural group of people of all skin colors who live apparently in the mountains of Nordic myth, but instead it looks like the like the downtown of Seattle, it's going to be stupid and will rightfully get criticized. So this is either going to be a great game or a massive bomb for Sony. So far, I'm more so leading it towards it doing well at least. Probably nowhere near Ragnarok or 2018, but again, time will tell. But my advice to Sony in the future is this: you need to bring back more male-centric stories again, because at this point, I mean, come on, it's getting kind of ridiculous. I'm halfway convinced that like if they announced a new Twisted Metal game, it would star the Sweet Tooth guy, but he'll be a woman instead, because that's what they have to do these days. My overall stance is this, okay? Women-led games are not bad, but I also agree that Sony is overdoing it to an exhaustive degree at this point. Keep Spider-Man about Peter Parker. If you want Miles, give him his own spin-off franchise, that's fine. Keep God of War about Kratos, and Kratos only. If you want to make an Atreus game, okay, but do it in a spin-off like Faye if that's what you're doing too. But remember that the core audience you have loves these franchises because of these characters. So give people what they want. I won't write off the God of Stories Faye spin-off yet, or whatever they end up calling it. I do think it has potential at least. I just hope They learned their lessons from all the failures and the criticism. Otherwise, history will just keep repeating itself. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like. See you next time, guys. Now, a God of War spin-off game starring Archangel Michael fighting demons in the name of God. Now that would be something worth cooking. I'm just saying. All right, see ya.